Shalom, shalom, everybody. Theory of Everything 11. As you can see, I'm in the boat. We out here in the lake. I done found me a little cozy spot. Okay, let me get right into it because the video's been cutting out. All right, so we went over the structure of the earth. The earth is flat with the dome over top of it. We also went over the creation of mankind. Mankind, with all the evidence, with all the science that we can gather about who man is today, it appears that he appeared in working order. So we understand all of those things. We also understand that the world before the flood was a different kind of world. It wasn't the world that we have today. It was a world where spirits and humans interacted in a much more open and identifiable way. Right now, the spirits and the humans have a relationship that is more secretive, as you can tell, because the society has mostly rejected spiritual understanding. So, with that being said, the new world after the flood is where we're getting started today, and ending in the Tower of Babel. All right, so Noah and his 3 sons come off of the ark. The entire world at this point in time is changed, right? All living creatures on the planet have, on the planet, whatever you want to call it, have been wiped out except for the creatures that were on the ark. Now, a lot of people say, okay, well, you couldn't fit all the different types of creatures on the ark, or you couldn't fit all the different types of animals. You got big animals, small animals, and then what about the animals that were, not clean and or not even genetically consistent with what the animals are, because in the old world there were a lot of aberrations and abnormalities from the angels mixing in, because they mixed in not only with humans but also with creatures too, with animals. So we know that there was a lot of admixture going on. So how did Noah get all of these animals on the ship? Well, for one, they didn't all have to be adult animals, right? So that they could be, smaller creatures. And also, you don't have to have all the different types of creatures. Now, hear me out. You have birds, and you have different types of birds, right? You have, birds that, you have ravens, you have crows, you have sparrows, you have all these different types of birds. But you don't have to get every single different type of bird in order to complete this commandment, the animals going 2 by 2. We also have to understand that what they think of as evolution is not evolution, is actually adaptation and mutation, which doesn't occur over millions of years. It can occur in a single lifetime, right? For instance, you've got this concept in your body called epigenetics. You've got this, concept to deal with called epigenetics, right? And epigenetics is the genetics that you kind of create during your life. And then those genetics are actually programmed into your body and then are passed on to the next generation. So you have the ability in the very next generation to be very, very different from who you were before. And this works with the animal kingdom as well. So you're looking at not a creature evolving technically. You're looking at a creature mutating, and a creature mutating in the next generation, not over millions of years, but in the next generation, because our bodies, the Creator knew what he was doing. Our bodies are made to adapt. So when we go out into any area, our bodies naturally adapt, right? And so not only our bodies, but creatures too. So you may have a sparrow, but then when the sparrow comes out and interacts with the rest of the environment, the sparrow, the next generation could change color. The next generation could change, I guess that would be plumage. They could change eating habits. And then eventually you would have not only a sparrow, but this other type of bird, and this other type of bird, and this other type of bird. And they could look or behave differently, but be the same creature originally. Do you see what I'm saying? And it doesn't include evolution, because what evolution posits is that you can change from a bird to a whole different genus of creature, right? So they're saying that the fish became a dog, or the salamander became a frog, right? Or the um, or a shark turning into a wolf, right? So none of these things we know are possible. No, we don't have any whatsoever evidence that cross-genus mutation is possible. It's just there's nothing. They even have a name for it called the missing link between ape and man. It doesn't exist. Okay, so we know that. So you didn't have to have all the creatures on the ark that we see today. You just have to have all the types of creatures, right? So again, we go past the ark. You have Noah and his 3 sons who come off the ark and are scared to come off the ark. They're on top of the mountain. You know, Yah opens the door for them. They come down off the ark, but not down off the mountain because they don't necessarily know if the world's going to be flooded again. And, you know, of course they do, but Noah is of a different mindset than his children, except for one, Shem. And so let's get into that. The word would be the reaction of the children to the flood. So we know that Shem stayed with his father and made and was a good son. It stayed with his father and was able to keep the commandments and did not rebel against the teachings of Yah, right, which Noah had at this time. But Ham and Japheth did. Ham and Japheth both went out. Japheth went to the northeast, and then from Mount Ararat, and then Ham went to the south, right? And so we know right off the bat that Ham's children, Mizraim, Put, Cush, and Canaan went south, and they started, you know, their own nations. They started their own deal. And then one thing that we also know, which I do have to bring up here, is that one of Ham's sons was cursed. And now, hear me out, because this is where it gets a little bit foggy, because we have in history what is known as the curse of Ham, right? It's known as the curse of Ham, but it's not actually the curse of Ham. It's actually the curse of Canaan. And this is when, you know, Ham saw his father's nakedness, and they had to walk backwards and put a robe over him. And we don't even necessarily know exactly what happened. Some people speculate and say that Ham, you know, copulated with his father's wife, which we are not sure happened, because it says uncovered the nakedness of his father. Now we can understand that to mean either he saw his father naked, which seems a little bit extreme, the punishment that he was given just for that thing. Or we can also see that it could be that he defiled his father's bed, which, you know, is weird, but we've heard of that happening down the line again too. So we don't actually know what happened with Ham, but we do know the punishment for it. The punishment was that Canaan would be cursed, right? That Canaan would be cursed. And so a lot of people speculate and say, oh, the wife got pregnant and gave birth to Canaan right then. And we don't necessarily follow that. But some people believe that that would be the case, and that would be the reason behind his cursing. But we don't follow that. We don't necessarily have any evidence that that is the case. But we do know that Ham had 4 sons, and Canaan in particular was the one that Noah decided to curse, right? And so the curse was that he would be a slave of slaves, you know, in his entire, he would be a slave among slaves. And now it doesn't say his entire existence, but it said that he will be a slave among slaves. And so we have another later on cursed, which comes from the Father himself, you know, Yahweh himself, and through Moses, that if the children of Israel don't keep the commandments, that they will also be slaves, right? And so this is where the confusion comes in, and how, you know, European society was able to hide who the children of Israel were, because you have 2 seeds that are cursed here. You have 2 in the Bible that are cursed, the seed of Canaan and then the seed of Israel. And so how do you determine which one is which? Because we also know in history that they both look exactly alike. So this is how you determine which one is which. you trace them down the lines, and then you see what exact curses are befalling them. So the Canaanites are said that they would be a slave among slaves, that they would be a slave to their brothers. And then we see that. We see that later on with the Israelites. We see that later on with the Egyptians. We see that the Canaanites. The Canaanites were slaves to the Egyptians. The Canaanites were slaves to the Israelites. The Canaanites later on were slaves to, all of these different nations. But what we don't see in Canaanite history is that they get scattered to the four corners of the earth, is that they are the tail and not the head, is that they'll be brother against brother, is that they'll never have an army, or never be, or if they keep the commandments, that their armies won't be successful. We don't see that they'll be diseased in these specific types of ways. We don't see anything about prison or being locked up in some sort of captivity all the time. We don't see any of these specific curses that are befalling the children of Israel now, this day. And then you could say that some of these curses are just, integral with slavery, but not disease, right? Not disease. And so we see disease, we see all of these different things befalling the children of Israel in America. And then we also see that the cues, the blessings as well. When you look at it, we're a musical people, we're an athletic people, we're a culture creating people. All of those things are blessings that the scripture also details that the children of Israel would have, that they'd be able to be popular, to be talented. So we understand that the children of Israel, according to prophecy, are the African Americans, people that were involved in the transatlantic slave trade, and the Canaanites were slaves way back to the Israelites, way back in David's time, so Joshua's time. We see that, and we see those two prophecies fulfilling themselves independently. So we don't have to associate one with the other, but, Europeans wanting to justify the captivity that they put us in, we're looking for a way to justify that captivity. And Canaan was an easy way to say, oh, okay, well, we say you guys come from Ham anyway. This particular group of people are supposed to be slaves anyway. So let's just go ahead and make them that, even though they knew for sure that they weren't, that not the Negroes, right? So if you look at, I think it's Jusinius, Biblical Encyclopedia, you'll find that the children of Ham are in there. And specifically, the Biblical Encyclopedia says that the Negroes are not the children of Ham. So we have that understanding. Okay, so once we come out there, we then have the children of Ham being the first ones to actually rebel, publicly against the father. And the first one of them being the son who is Cush, where we get the term Ethiopia from. The children of Cush are the Ethiopians, right? And so the Ethiopians, or the children of Cush, or Cush's son, Nimrod, was the first man to rule the earth, right? The scripture says that he was a mighty hunter before Yah, right? But what that actually means is not only does he hunt creatures and animals, that he also hunts men. And that's his real specialty, is hunting men. And at this point, he is completely set against Yah, right? Completely set against Yah. So much so that he begins to organize the children of men on the earth against Yah. And one of the things that they want to do is ensure that they could never be flooded out again. So what they go to do, they all speak the same language at this time. So what they go to do is build the Tower of Babel. And so the term Babel is actually the Hebrew term for confusion, Babel, right? And so you guys are not going to believe this either, but it is also where the term Bible comes from. Because again, this is a satanic society, and the things that they're naming the scripture are going to be the names that they use. They may be the correct scripture. The words might all be the same, but calling it Bible is Hebrew for Babel, right? So we have Cush, Nimrod, who comes out as this mighty hunter and organizes the children of men on the earth to go and build this Tower of Babel. I'm going to have to hurry up. We're going to run long. Some texts tell us that the tower was so huge, right? That it was the largest structure ever made. It said walking it from one end to the other would take 3 days, right? And I believe this is in the book of Jasher. It's not in the Bible that we know of, the 66 books today. It's in the book of Jasher, the extra biblical work, the apocryphal works. But you'll be able to find it. And this is something that I can believe and be verified. Josephus verifies a lot of this information too. But 3 days, 3 days journey from one end to the other. That's how big this tower was. A lot of people believe it was some sort of pyramidal structure because it's supposed to have 4 corners and you can walk one end to the other. We don't know if that is the case or not. We know it's called a tower. So also, the text says that it took 1 year to get the stones from the bottom of it to the part where they're building. 1 year for them to pass it up. And now how they pass these stones up, because you've seen the pyramids, and the stones in the pyramids are big, and they're cut to a certain specific shape. We don't know the technology that they had or were able to use at that time. A lot of people say that giants helped them bring it up, and we don't necessarily have evidence of that, but it's not out of the question. We don't know how they were able to transport these stones so well, but they were in a very early time period, and we can't even do this today. So they had access to some sort of technology, maybe not a machine or anything like that, but some sort of understanding that they were able to move these blocks very, very efficiently, right? And so they cared more about the blocks than they did about the people. I was just talking to someone the other day about how the apocryphal work tells us that if a man fell off the tower, that they wouldn't even stop working. They'd continue to go. But if a block fell off, they'd mourn the block. And this tells you how focused they were on completing their task against Yah. So the purpose of the tower was, for one, to show the power of mankind against Yah. For two, to protect themselves from an additional flood. That they would go in the tower and go as high as they could, and Yah could never flood them out again. I don't know what makes them think that, that they'd be able to get away from Yah. But this is what Nimrod's purpose was. And we see that Yah is going to, for sure destroy this purpose. So what he does is he comes down, and the scripture literally says that Yah came down to see what the children of men were doing. And so we know himself, Yah didn't come down, but who is the entity that carries the name of Yah that is active in the earth? That would be Mashiach, Yahusha. We know that. We know that from the text. We know that. We know that. So he sends his son down to see what everybody's doing, his son who speaks in his name. And he saw that the children of men were doing this wicked thing, right? And so what he does is he confounds the languages at this point. And that's why we have the term Babel, or he's speaking Babel today, because the people who spoke to one another at the Tower of Babel couldn't understand each other, and then they forsook the building of the tower. It's a brilliant plan that Yah instilled in order to separate mankind on the earth and to stop them from doing this wicked and crazy thing, right? And so we even have evidence that the tower itself was around all the way until late antiquity, right? We have Josephus saying that the tower was actually, seeable, that you could see the top of the tower. It was covered up, but you could see the top of the tower, or the parts of the tower in a specific place up until a certain time when it was buried, right? So we have evidence that the tower existed. And then not only do we have evidence from Josephus that the tower existed, Josephus quotes other ancient writers from other nations to prove that the tower existed, because he's writing the Romans. Romans are a relatively new people that, don't have access to antiquity. That's why they wanted all the ancient documents so they could have this information, and still do, and still want them, still have them. But Josephus told them, hey, this particular, ancient guy, wrote about the same thing. This particular ancient woman, I think it was a Sibyl, wrote about the same thing, and verifies in history outside of Hebrews that the Tower of Babel was real. So go check out what Josephus says about the Tower of Babel. Very, very, very interesting. Okay, but not only that, the languages were also confused at this time. Now, do we have proof today? Because what we like to do in these theory theory of everything, or theories of everything, um, is qualify what we're saying about the Bible with some things that we can see scientifically, linguistically, biologically, on the earth right now. So one thing that we do see on the earth with language, and I guess I've got to also try to explain this to you guys very quickly. We're at a 20-minute mark right now. Is that a lot of text, not a lot of text, but one text in particular says that Hebrew was the language of heaven, and that Abraham later on did not speak Hebrew, that Hebrew began to be ceased, or was ceased to be spoken after the tower, after the Tower of Babel, that people forgot how to speak Hebrew. But let's look. If Hebrew was the original language, if Hebrew was the language of heaven, as it says, and I believe this is in the book of Jasher. I always attribute everything to Jasher and not Jubilees, but it's either in Jasher or Jubilees. And that an angel came down and taught Abraham Hebrew, and that Hebrew was the language of heaven, because that's what the script says, the text says there, that an angel came down and taught Abraham the language of heaven, which was Hebrew. So we know that the whole earth spoke one tongue before the flood, and we also know that that language was not called Hebrew, right? We know that Adam spoke a particular language because he's naming the animals, right? He's naming the animals, and Yah has brought him forth to see what he would name them. And it's a kind of touching moment between father and son with Adam, that Yah is excited to see what he'll name the animals. But he's naming them, right? So he's dealing in a language, right? Very early on, very straight away, an already formed language as soon as Adam was created, right? Already formed, ready to go. So no linguistic evolution either. That's what we see in history too, that language appears. There's no abadabadaba and then language. This language appears, writing appears. There's no proto-writing, there's no proto-language. It appears fully developed with grammar, structure, everything. So that's one clue that language was created. Again, in the beginning was the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim. We know that. But also, if you look at modern society, there are Hebrew words that you can find in every single language on the face of the earth. And then not only that, there's also Hebrew syntax that's found in every language. And I'll give you some examples, right? So we looked at the Old English, right, with the thous and the these, right? If thou will hear my voice, and I can't remember the rest of that scripture, but thou is what we're talking about here. So thou, we know, is the Old English term for you, right? So listen to how that sounds, thou, thou, thou. Does that word sound familiar? Thou. Is there a Hebrew letter? Thou. Yes, there is. It's the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, thou. What does it mean? Thou means, if you're looking at just the letter, it means mark. But if you use it in grammar, in Hebrew grammar, if you put a thou in front of a word, it means you, or you will. So thou in Hebrew grammar means you, and thou in Old English means you, which means that Old English had Hebrew in it, built in to it already, right there. All right, another example. Let's look at Spanish with the same understanding. Have you ever heard somebody in Spanish say, "ta loco, ta loco"? It means what? You crazy, right? "Ta loco." I worked in many factories and, in America, and developed the Spanglish, working with, Latin American people in warehouses. And one of the terms that they would always say would be "ta loco." And that would be a joke, a running joke that, I took with me. But I noticed the way that Spanish people speak, they got the "ta" in front of it, right? And it means you are crazy. So again, if you say talak, talak, what does that mean in Hebrew? You will walk. So putting the ta in front as a thou, again, is the same grammatical structure. So you have in the Latin languages, both English and Spanish, Hebrew, right? And you wouldn't expect it to be there. So let's go further than that. Let's look at the word samurai, right? Samurai in Japanese culture. The term samurai means guardian. It's a warrior who guards the king, right? So the term guardian in Hebrew is shamar. You know, guard the commandments. You shamar the commandments. That's guarding, right? To watch the commandments, to watch over them. So shamari or samurai is my guardian in Hebrew. In Hebrew, samurai is my guardian in Hebrew. So clearly, one for one, Hebrew word in ancient Japan. I'll give you another one. The term chi, which comes out of India, right? The term chi, what does that mean? It's supposed to be, there's a whole spiritual philosophy associated with it, a whole pagan spiritual philosophy associated with it, right? So it's your life force, your energy, the thing that keeps you going in your body. And there's supposed to be chi spots and all that. We don't get into none of that. It's pagan philosophy, right? But what we do know is that the Hebrew word for life is not chi, it's chi, right? But in modern understanding, it's spelled C-H-A-I in English letters, so chi. So chi, these are the same word, but found in ancient context outside of Hebrew. That chi and chi is the same thing. What about the African cultures? We see here that, or in Jamaica, that they have oberman, right? In Jamaica they have something that's called an oberman or obeyaman. So what that is a witch doctor or a wizard or a witch, a warlock, someone who deals in black magic, spiritual wickedness, black magic, voodoo. That is an oberman, right? A witch doctor. Okay, what is an oba in ancient Hebrew? It is a warlock, a wizard, a conjurer of spirits, a diviner. Witchcraft. Same word, same context, no difference whatsoever. No difference whatsoever. Just right there, incorporated into the language. What about here in West Africa? You have an Elohim named Yah. That is the ancient name for the Father. And not only that, you have people called Yah here too. Because if you're born on a particular day in this society, you're called Yah. Or, if you're female, even Abba Yah. So we see all the characteristics of ancient Hebrew scattered throughout the world in language, as we would expect. Linguistically, it looks like all language emerged from one point and still contains the same syntax all over the world. Even if you look at the alphabet, A, B, C, D, right? In ancient Greece, the alphabet was not A, B, C, D. It was alpha, beta, gamma, delta, right? And so this is the alphabet. Well, what about the Hebrew alphabet? So you've got A in English, you've got alpha in Greek, but in Hebrew, aleph. So A, alpha, aleph, same letter. B, beta, bayit. Do you see what I'm saying? C, gimel, and gamma. It's a little bit different, but close from the Hebrew to the ancient Greek. And then D, delta, dalet. It's the same thing, right? So please understand that when you're looking at language, you're not really even looking at a real separation here. You're looking at dialects, really, all over the world of the same exact language. Already, right now, even though we can't understand one another, The syntax is the same. Some of the words are the same. The pictographic style of writing is the same for every culture. Even English pictographs. An A is an aleph, which is an ox. Turn that A upside down, and don't you see it's got horns and a chin, like an ox? You know? The term for the letter R is in Hebrew, resh, right? Resh. And it means head, right? So look at that R. Look at the way the R is shaped. It's got now, and then look at my head. It's got the bump right here. And then it's got this coming out here, like an uppercase R, right? Like it's looking like a pictograph of a person with a beard, like an Egyptian. Do you see the R? There's the straight line. There's the first bump, and then there's the beard coming down. R, resh. Resh in Hebrew means head. Do you see your language is pictographic now, and you didn't know it? And so that ties this language that we're speaking today all the way back to the ancient world, all the way back to the Tower of Babel. So this is Theory of Everything 11, the Tower of Babel. Just wanted you to know that there's evidences for the scripture all around you already that prove everything that the Bible is saying. Shalom, shalom.